Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Restitching the Tapestry, episode 25. We're on episode 25.
Wow.
Oh my God. It does not seem like we've done this many episodes so far, but we have, and I think it's extremely impressive. Um, this episode was kind of a last minute idea considering all of the things that have been happening over the past week and a half. And we were just like, we're going to push back the next episode and just talk about this topic, talking a lot about what's been happening in current events. And we're going to also discuss mental health in relation to this topic. So just prepare for that. But Ari, how have you been doing?
I mean, that's a question given recent events. But I am physically fine. I am doing well. Um, but there's just a lot. There's just a lot going on.
Yeah, I very much relate with that. Like, I would say that I am doing fine too, physically, but like honestly, I am feeling the weight of everything. Granted, I feel like I've been feeling the weight of everything for the past 4 years, but it's kind of culminated in the past week or so. And honestly, like my big problem is that I've been just watching the news nonstop this week, and I've had to take moments and just kind of pry myself away from it in order to just catch my breath for a while. Like that's been my biggest obstacle is just trying to catch my breath. And we're going to be talking about that in a little bit too. So we have Arpy's here, Igny's here, Shayna's here. Igny's having some internet problems. I'm sorry about that. Technology never ceases to be fun, right?
Right.
Technology drives me bananas 90% of the time. So before we get started, I'm going to, of course, make sure that we mention that our show's mission statement. So, many witness different atrocities, large or small. Ironic, this is the first sentence, considering the last week, that fray the social fabric around us. Much of the time, many may feel powerless and know not how to address such things. And this fray has gotten much worse with the rise of social media, because in essence, we're able to share in this trauma collectively as it takes place on a mass scale. So that begs the question of what can we do to mend the communities that have seen considerable tragedy, most of which privileged groups have caused and many who won't admit their personal involvement. So our goal with Restitching the Tapestry is to, well, restitch the tapestry socially by talking about these events and these difficulties through conversation, creativity, and action. And our goal is to, in some way, educate, whether it be educate ourselves, educate those who watch, or all of the above. Okay. So obviously this past week has been extremely hectic because not only are we juggling of course one of the biggest pandemics in the last 100 years, but we are also dealing with a lot of political unrest, especially here in the United States. And I know it's been taxing on a lot of people, and and I'm saying it's been taxing on everyone, regardless what their political affiliation is. I think everybody feels the weight of everything. Because I've had a few, I mean, everybody knows that we are liberal leaning, of course, but I've also had conversations with those who are leaning conservative who have also been very exhausted by the constant conflict happening. So I think that in some way we're all experiencing this. And for some groups of people, it's different than others. But um, David's here. He says that we all look nice this evening. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
We certainly try. um, so, Ari, okay. Let's let first and foremost let's talk a little bit about the pandemic. Okay, so we were doing videos last year talking about our experiences throughout the pandemic, very regular like vlog-esque videos. And obviously we've kind of fallen away from that over the latter half of 2020 and the beginning of this year. How would you describe your experiences navigating everything that's been happening with regard to the pandemic?
Um, I think that it's still bad. I think that it's actually gotten worse. Um, I was just listening to this program today that said they don't think that 2021 is going to be worse than 2020, thankfully. There's that, but the vaccine rollout is coming. Uh, um, it's just that uh, Biden is talking about getting 100 million vaccines out in the first 6 months of his presidency, and getting this stimulus. He's talking about a stimulus package to get staffing and sites started to get these vaccines out to people. But is it possible? I think it's possible. Is it probable? I think it's not probable. I think that I'm hesitant to say that he is going to get these vaccine rollouts happening, that it's going to take time. I think that we may see by like summer a lessening of the vaccine and um, more people being vaccinated, but they just don't have the vaccines. Like, they can't just say everybody over 65 go get vaccinated, because they don't have enough vaccines for everybody over 65. So they can't just say release the floodgates, go get
Right. Because
it.
that would be utter chaos if it happened, And like, and I know that they've been making elaborate plans, and that's been currently happening, like prioritizing certain groups of people, like of course, like frontline workers and medical workers first, and then of course, people who are of an age who where they need to get the vaccine because they're immunocompromised or more vulnerable. So looking at the comments here, Shayna says, I am so over the pandemic. It's been hell on a roller coaster. Yes. Like I think all of us could argue that we're done with it. At least mentally we're done with it. Obviously, we're still dealing with it. But
But even
David
if you
said,
get vaccinated, it doesn't.
oh yeah.
Oh,
Like
go ahead.
it's not a 100% guarantee. It just provides kind of like a cushion. David says the pandemic has exacerbated health inequalities, economic inequalities, and worsened people's understanding of science, thanks to people who love to devalue it. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
100%. And that's something that we're going to touch on a little bit further, kind of midway through the video, too, because I do want to have a conscious conversation about the devaluing of science and education and how that has kind of culminated in this overarching lack of care, let's just say, or lack of taking certain things seriously because people are continually questioning reliability, like those who are reliable sources. Um, Shayna says, I have full intentions to get vaccinated come hell or high water. Samesies. Samesies. For me, going back to our question about navigating the pandemic, like it's been pretty consistently the same for me since it started. Like obviously I'm working from home. I really don't go out unless it's to go shopping. There was a small lull in like August and September where everything was kind of opening up here in Michigan, and I know we, like my partner and I, did go out to dinner once, and it was nice. It was like an outdoor setting that was really nice, but that quickly ended once things started spiking here in Michigan. I like honestly for me it's mostly been affecting me mental health wise. Like I am very much an introverted person, but I like whenever I hear the announcement that we're going to be online for another semester, like I just have to mentally prepare and be like, "Oh gosh, that means I'm going to be basically working at home for an entire year when you think about it." And at first, it was kind of freeing because I don't know, the performative aspect, like I've mentioned, of teaching is really exhausting on a social level. But now that I'm not used to seeing people all the time, now that my routine has been kind of been thrown to the wayside for several months now, it's really difficult to build motivation, and I'm sure that a lot of people are concerned about that. And honestly, I'm speaking from a place of privilege because I have the luxury of having a stable job during all of this. Like I know there are a lot of people out there who don't have that. They may be on unemployment or maybe having difficulty accessing unemployment. So truthfully, my heart goes out to those people largely because I can't imagine what it would feel like to be that uncertain, that kind of lost in all of this stuff happening. I have a couple really good friends who this has happened to, and it's been very financially taxing.
Yeah, I just you start to miss like it's just like missing like the little things. Like I had a theater close down near me that I used to frequent all the time, and um, just like being able to visit a restaurant or just like I don't know, just like being able to walk around businesses that are open and just being able to like be around people who just having that closeness to people and just like not having that closeness anymore and just like not being afraid that you're going to catch it from someone if you'd like talk to somebody and like it's just like you're kind of afraid to interact with like anyone now. It's just it's caused kind of like this climate of fear and isolation. uh I don't know. I just don't like it. It's
Same.
uh, and it's not good. It's and people are panicking and like I don't know. I don't like it.
It for me, normality seems like a memory, like just kind of like this nostalgia at this point. I know, like I was listening to a song the other day that was kind of like talking about life before the pandemic, and like I almost cried about it because I was just like, wow, like I kind of feel like that I've been so detached from how things used to be that I've forgotten how it used to be, if that makes sense. Like the distance between now and that time seems very alarming to me. And I think this is going to be something we're going to really reflect on in our future, like historically speaking, because 2020, and of course the large part of this year, it's just going to kind of seem like this black hole of just lack of normality, lack of normal day-to-day routines. But I had this very interesting conversation with a friend the other day about whether or not normality was good all the time, because truthfully, all normality is just the cycle of working, sleeping, working. I mean, if we generalize it, and of course everyone has a diverse set of experiences, but that is largely what it is here. So David says, in many ways, it reminds me of World War II, and that whole world had been plunged into this chaos. Nothing like this since then. Not even 9/11 was like this. How much people have had to let go of. Yeah, like it's interesting that you mentioned that, David, because 9/11, like obviously it was a national trauma that we all experienced, but the world picked up after it happened. We kept talking about it and still talk about it, but it didn't really bring the world to this international standstill like it is now. You know, Kevin is here. Hi, Kevin. It's good to see you.
There is an upside of lockdown that I did note the other day. I grabbed a newspaper and it said that climate gas emissions were or methane emissions were down because people were not driving to work in Los Angeles. in major cities. So because they weren't commuting, that in 2020, carbon emissions were down like by like 1.9% or something.
So I mean, that did something for the environment, so that's good. And I know a lot of people, I mean, like you and I, for example, we had time to be more creative like that. I mean, I think that is definitely a plus. That was a nice thing for me over the course of 2020.
But I mean, I would like to be creative, not in lockdown.
Right. Well, yeah, I think for me, this has been this cruel realization of Donny, you don't need to just be creative during a pandemic. You can be creative all the time. You just have to actually make the time to do it and prioritize it, right? Not do it because you're bored and there's nothing else to do. So that's going to be my objective this year is to balance that more effectively.
There was a comedian on YouTube that released a video that said normies getting creative. It said all of the normies during pandemic are starting to get creative, like they're all writing books and operas, so he doesn't have to be creative anymore.
That is, and it's really funny to think about that because I know like almost all of the musicians that I love, they're all like churning out albums this year too. They're just like, we've had so much free time, like to be creative, to do all this, and I'm just like, this is to me, this is a problem. Like if we can only do what we love when there's a pandemic and have the time to do it, I think that speaks loudly that we need to reinvent and reassess
Our lives, yeah.
our lives, like how we structure work. And that's not to say that work isn't important, of course, but I think that work becomes this giant monster, let's just say, that tramples everything. And we're convinced that there's nothing left of the rubble, but we haven't taken a chance to actually look through the rubble, create a mosaic with the rubble.
I hate to say it, but Taylor Swift put out 2 albums this year.
I know, right? Like, damn it, if Taylor Swift can do it, like, what is?
She isn't bogged down by like tours and stuff, and that's the
Mhm,
difference. Is like you can churn out like 2 albums a year if you're just like constantly creating.
right. Igni, we've just been talking about what the pandemic has done and what we are kind of adapting to. David mentions, I think it also has caused many to ask, why is it so important in life? Is it the big expensive things or in stature, or is it people and memories? I think it's people and memories that matter. I think a lot of people are coming to that realization too. It's not this constant assembly line that we're all expected to contribute to that is significant. It's creating connections with people, creating extensions of ourselves through the creativity. And maybe after this pandemic, if there's anything positive to take away from it, maybe it is a shift in our life process, you know. David says capitalist race rat, a rat race. Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. And Igni, I am also excited when bands make more music. Um, oh, and Shayna's good thing that happened to Shayna was that her fiance proposed. Yes, that makes me happy. Congratulations, by the way. I know I've mentioned it to you before, but congratulations again.
Congratulations.
Um, so, but yeah, we wanted to take a couple of moments to talk a bit about the pandemic and what it's been doing because it's been a while since we've done a pandemic update, but um, since it's something that we're all still living with and adapting to, I think it requires as frequent conversation as we can make because I know that a lot of people are getting lulled into this false sense of security where they think that at this point, if it's not affected them, then it's fine. You know, that's not the case. Like it can still very much affect you. What's your favorite tea, Ari? Kevin's asking both of us.
I like Earl Grey.
Yes, me too. I'm drinking Lady Grey, which is Earl Grey with like a bit more citrus in it.
It's true. That's my
It's really
second
good.
favorite.
I do love Lady Grey tea. Like whenever I go to Meijer, I buy all of the Lady Grey boxes. Um, I've been really addicted to this apple cinnamon tea that I've had lately, but we're getting on a tangent now. I'm getting on a tangent now. So, all right. So, chamomile. Okay, chamomile's good. So, I totally just exited out of the notes. Here we go. Great.
The next thing that we were going to talk about is the Electoral College vote confirmation.
Ah, yes. Thank you, Ari. I know you got my back. So, this is let's just say, chapter 1 of the events of this past week. So, obviously, the Electoral College vote happened, and then, of course, Congress gathered to ratify President-elect Joe Biden's.
So first
Um,
of all,
oh, go ahead.
with the Electoral College confirmation vote, it's supposed to be a it's kind of just like an award ceremony. You just show up, you count the votes. It's not supposed to be something that you object to, Ted Cruz. You don't go there and say, I object. Shut up, Ted Cruz. Sit down. There's no objection to you can't object to an award ceremony. It's already said and done. The states have already voted. They've already gone through their legal options. They've already done things. If he really wanted to object, he could have done that with the state legislator, and he could have done that a long time ago. He was just being kind of a little dickhead.
Well, and then the truth is, it was, I mean, a lot of them did take it up with state legislatures, but it just,
It
like,
didn't go any.
yeah, there was,
It didn't go anywhere because he won the election. He won the
and
election. There
yeah,
was nothing.
yeah.
But
I like, I know,
ah,
and
ah,
see,
it
what
just
what
made me so mad when he was just like, "I object," and it's like, "Shut up, Ted Cruz. Nobody cares."
I've been getting really frustrated watching, like, because I know I watched that too, and I love that David mentioned that it's ceremonial. It's like a civic religion. It's very true. And for me, and this has been the case for the last 4 years, because a lot of politicians, I mean, this happens on both sides, but this is very much prominent and prevalent, coming from conservatives right now. They're very much about gaslighting people into believing some sort of warped reality of how things are in their perspective. And like, as a person who has gone through abusive relationships, like, at first, this has been really triggering for me, because how many times, like, I've had so many people try to like gaslight me into thinking that I'm wrong or crazy, or that this is not really what's happening, this, like, this conspiracy web. And I really think that, in a way, our country is going through a metaphorical breakup right now, and we are continuously being exposed to this litany of gaslighting and abusive language and rhetoric coming from those people. And I mean, we'll talk about how we can potentially heal from that later on in the episode, but am I the only one that feels that way? Like, what do you think, Ari? Am I just.
Yeah, and the fact that he like objected during the civic ceremony, it's like when you're at Thanksgiving dinner and your uncle objects to your dad cutting the turkey. What are you doing? I'm okay. I stopped cutting the turkey for 5 minutes, so you can tell me that I need to stop cutting the turkey. And then what do? I pick up the knife and I keep cutting the turkey.
Right, the turkey's already been cooked, like.
What are we gonna do?
We can't put it back in the oven, like it'll burn, you know. So, I love that analogy, by the way. That's a good analogy. But so like, okay, so that ceremonial action was taking place, of course, and they got through it. Well, they were intending to get through it quickly until there was essentially a riot that happened at the state capitol, as most of you are aware of. So down the street, it was like a mile down the street, like the president and other supporters were doing rallies of sorts and kind of inciting the crowds. Not kind of, they were inciting the crowds, basically making statements like, we need to march to the capitol and and fight for America because it's being taken away, and so on and so forth. And of
And
course,
Rudy Giuliani said, we got to do a trial by combat.
Jesus Christ. I
What
forgot
is
about
wrong
that.
with these people?
I
He's going to get
like
disbarred for it. They talked about disbarring him for this comment.
that's scary to me. Like that's terrifying. All of this is terrifying, but that specifically is terrifying. And if you watch a lot of the news footage, um, many of these rioters, if that is even a word, rioters, that is the correct word, but
Provocateurs.
provocateurs, many of these people were reciting the same words that were spoken to them during these speeches. And to me, like that is a clear example of what incitement does. Like if these people are angry and violent and saying the exact same thing by quote, like that speaks very loudly, you know. And I really like, it just frustrates me that there are people denying the fact that that happened. Like the footage is out there, the recording of the speeches, those are out there.
Regardless of the cameras they tried to destroy.
Mhm. Yeah, I forgot about that too. Um and like of course this large mob of people just marched to Congress and broke barriers, circumvented police officers, at times violently, started vandalizing the building, breaking into windows, breaking in doors, climbing up walls, not to mention getting into the actual building, storming through the hallways, up the stairwells, into offices.
Did you see the police officer who said welcome to Congress?
I did not see that.
Yes. So they broke into the Congress and there was a police officer who was like, welcome to Congress.
Wow. Yeah, I did not see that. I did see reports that there was a lot of speculation that um, there was assistance from the inside, um, like for the riders, like assistance of people like telling them where to go, like what to do, how to get in. Like to me, that is extremely concerning, and I have no doubt that they're gonna that they are probably already investigating that. But it's like I think it's very telling that a large group of people this size, how they can access one of the most secure buildings in our entire country to the extent where people were literally being injured and fearing for their lives. There were fatalities even.
Yeah, the police officer who got trampled in the
Oh,
riot
like
or
toward,
in the rioting.
yeah, like
And
at the
then
toward the
there
entrance,
was
I think.
the Capitol police officer who saw that the building was not secured,
Mhm.
and he got a whole group of people, a whole like over hundreds of people to follow him away from Congress and to
Mhm.
follow him instead of turning right. Did you see that video?
I did that. Yeah, wow, that like
I
David
mean, that
says
guy's a hero.
that he is a hero. I think many of those like officers and agents were heroes that day. And the Capitol was severely understaffed. I find it hard to believe that wasn't intentional. You know, it's interesting you mentioned that because I was very skeptical about that too. Like I just find it hard to believe when you have the vice president, the speaker of the house, and all of these senators and congress people in one building. Like, I feel like it should be expected for it to be highly secured, you know.
I
But the
mean,
fact, oh, go ahead.
if they have a protest, where are the Capitol police officers? Where is the National Guard? Where's anybody? They had zip ties. They had, I mean, they had where was anybody?
Hmm.
They had a
Yeah.
noose. They had like a guillotine.
Oh my gosh, I saw that. They like the gallows that they had right outside of, to like that image. When I saw that image, I did not know what to say. I never ever fathomed that I would ever see an image like that in my lifetime, because I really believed that we had come so far that that symbol of violence and death wouldn't be utilized by sensible people. And not only that, but of course, we saw that individual who had the Confederate flag in the Capitol building, which is the only time that that image, that piece of iconography has ever been inside that building. It never even reached inside that building during the Civil War. That again is also very concerning to me.
Yeah, it's just it doesn't it's just like the mind boggles. It just like I have a hard time processing it. Like it just I can't I can't make sense of it. It just it's so and the images like and we're supposed to feel bad because a woman got shot who was a protester and like I don't feel bad at all like because they were like raiding
Well,
like
yeah,
they were doing like a horrible thing and like I'm not going to feel bad for the woman who was following Trump's orders. Like I'm just not people are like, "Oh, isn't it so terrible that she did this?" And it's like or that she got killed and it's like, No."
I mean, like, obviously, I don't want anyone to die if possible. I
But she was doing something that
but
she wasn't supposed to be
well,
doing.
it's like I watched the video footage and I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head. If you look, they were trying to get in through a window that they had broken, like it was a doorway, and like literally like police officers and people inside were like barricading it. Like, to me, this person probably was aware that there were police officers there who were,
And
you know,
they're shooting to keep them out.
yeah, they were like trying to draw a line, you know. So, I- I just think that this
I'm not
whole,
gonna I'm gonna take a stand and say I'm not gonna feel bad that she died. Like I'm not gonna feel bad that that something happened to her because she was playing with fire and she got burned.
mhm. Well,
I mean,
a lot of them were playing with fire too. Like, they knew, I feel like they knew the ramifications of what they were doing.
and now they're all getting arrested and like good for them because they deserve it. They deserve to get arrested. They deserve to go to jail for 20 years because what they did was wrong.
Well, and a lot of this comes down to accountability too. Like, this has been a very frequent thing that has been discussed over the past few months, because we've had politicians doing so many unbelievably troubling things, and a large swath of our population has tried to, make those people accountable, but their supporters just don't want to acknowledge anything that they do wrong, thus making accountability this moot point. And that, I think, is a very dangerous road to go down, because if they do something wrong and they can't be held accountable for it, or aren't held accountable for it, what precedent is there for societal structure? What precedent is there for unity? What precedent is there for peace? Like, there has to be some sort of established structure to work in. And if that structure isn't there, that's dangerous, in my opinion.
It
So
is.
I really think that a lot of this, especially with these arrests, like it's accountability taking place, and it needs to take place because many of these people, not only were they being violent, they were making threats. There were people threatening to execute Vice President Pence. There were people threatening to execute Speaker Pelosi and other Congress people.
The
Like,
left would never do this. The
no,
left would never
never.
do this.
Never, ever, ever. Now, keep in mind, like, and like I recently watched a live stream that Congresswoman Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez made about talking about her experience with the event. It was extremely informative, and she was talking about how like extremists have been given a powerful platform to work with, and that's how they've been able to consolidate. And I would argue that most of these people at this large riot, they were extremists who have been incited. Now, I'm not saying that all Trump supporters are bad people, because I do know a lot of them who are very good people, but I do think that we are at a very critical juncture where if there's any lingering support for those who have incited things like this, I think serious questions need to be asked. You know, like if you are still supporting a person despite all of the negative things that they've said and done, especially in the last few weeks, like,
You have
is
to
there,
ask some serious
yeah,
questions.
like what modicum of objectivity is there remaining? You know, and keep in mind, like, if this were the opposite side, like if this were happening to a Democratic president, like, you bet your ass, like, I would be asking questions, I would be criticizing, I'd be like, what is this? Is not democracy. This is not acceptable in any way, you know? So it's really sad. And it's really, like I've mentioned before, it speaks loudly to how easy it is for a person having social power to rhetorically manipulate entire groups of people, to rhetorically manipulate entire wings of like journalism and um, so on and so forth. Interesting. David mentions also there's some new concern with how Google algorithms have pushed people increasingly into more polarized echo chambers on the internet. Yes, I saw that actually a couple of days ago, except for this, it was in context regarding Facebook because
It's true.
because
That's the
Zucker.
reason why I quit Facebook, is because they turn you into these echo chambers, and um they they heighten conspiracy theories, and they heighten just these overarching ideas about like just a lot of stuff that um it just gets you into this like almost like frenzy of emotion with
Mhm.
just like your ideas and your candidates and just a lot of stuff. um it's what my aunt is going through. She believes a lot of stuff that just is like unbelievable, and she doesn't read actual news. Like, she doesn't go to outside sources that are reputable. She gets all of her news from Facebook, and she believes stuff like her most recent thing that she believes is that the Pope has gotten arrested for pedophilia because he's part of this like international sex ring of something that the liberals have started, and that he's been arrested, and that he is the head of this liberal sex crime ring that's propagated by the Chinese Communist Party.
I don't even know what to say. I, I don't know what to say. I like, wow.
It's very complicated. She knows all of the details. I'm sure she'll tell you.
Well, like, of course, like I've gotten in debates with people, and I often like I will ask like, could you provide me with some sources? Because if I mean if this is something that you really believe in, I want to see what reputable sources you're getting it from. I will have people send me YouTube videos, like a person ranting on Facebook as a source, like, and I'm just like, these aren't sources. But the big dilemma though is that there has just been this large lack of belief in professionals, you know? Like a lot like if I try to like use an article source, like the immediate reaction or response that's given is, well, the media is corrupt. The media is not reliable anymore. Those aren't reliable sources. Regardless, like who is doing the speaking in the source, it could be a doctor who's like worked 15 years of their life to get a degree in something. It could be a journalist who has considerable years of experience, so on and so forth, and or scientists, you know. And I really think that this and this kind of answers a question that I have later. That I put a question of let's see, where was it? I put a question in here that says, do you think everything that's been happening reflects a larger problem our country has been facing for a number of years? And I think that problem has been a devaluing of education largely because education is the center point of everything where people are taught their career areas, they're taught civics, they're taught um, how to professionalize themselves in their careers. And people have been made to believe that education is this liberal machine attempting to corrupt people by churning them out as these bleeding heart liberal assembly line implements or whatever, when really that's not the case at all. And that's contributed to people not believing in professional expertise, which is why we don't have people believing what doctors are saying about the pandemic, what scientists are saying about global warming, what journalists are saying, what uh, teachers or professors are saying about like the current state of things, and a whole bunch of other groups of people, right? David says that it is like it's critical, it's largely about critical thinking. It is like critical thinking allows us to examine something from multiple perspectives and assess and make some sort of rational judgment call on something, you know. And a lot of these people react to what they hear, what's spoken to them, what they read immediately without asking themselves those critical questions in their mind of like, is this reliable? Is this correct? How does this add up in conjunction with other sources, you know?
Well, some of the things that you mentioned also go against like uh Christianity, and that with some of the Republican Party and some of the things that like conservatives believe, it goes hand in hand with Christianity in our country. So it's kind of this interwoven mesh. So they tend to believe things that are they tend not to believe things because they like evolution. They have a hard time believing because it's not part of their Christian beliefs, and they have a hard time believing climate change because they'd have a hard time believing scientists because scientists are the enemy because they're not of God, and things like that. When really, you know, and we mentioned this in our episode about science and religion, is that science and religion can go hand in hand, and you don't need to necessarily be diametrically opposed. That you can have religion and science work together and
Yeah.
be one thing. But uh, a lot of people tend to not believe that you can have those things be together, and so they tend to look down upon it and see it as like as a negative, and so they tend not to believe
Right.
science.
It's interesting that you mentioned that too, because in that live stream that AOC did, she mentioned that a lot of this extremist behavior all comes back down to supremacy. Like certain smaller groups of people have this fantasy that only one group of people are most powerful and that those people should be able to determine and dictate everything for everyone else.
It's true.
And I think that has, I mean, not only can this be said for race, like I think this also is something that is underlying in religion too. Like there's this belief that only one religion should matter and everybody else should ascribe to that. Igni mentions one of the problems, though, is people that they associate experts with. They think that they are just in it for the money and that they want the money and will say anything, right? Like I do think it comes back down to like this materialism being a huge variable. Like I know a lot of people assume that a person isn't going to be professionally or emotionally invested enough in their career that it's just all to churn out some sort of paycheck, right? But if a person's going to be dedicating a decade of their lives to something, like to me, that suggests that it's more than just money, especially considering some careers don't pay as significantly as others. And David says it's another symptom of the dichotomous issues in America. Yes. I know a lot of people get really uncomfortable to like talking about the dichotomous issues in America, but I think that in order to keep growing as a nation that we have to have these conversations. Like there has to be continuous reality checks. There has to be comparisons made to what's happened in history because like we always are hearing this cliche phrase of like history repeats itself, and it does.
It's
Like
true. Yeah.
it definitely does. Like
I
there are
mean,
many different instances in history where very similar things that happened over the past week have happened.
it hasn't been quite like this, but it's
There are parallels.
parallels, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we've never had white supremacists take over the Capitol and try to zip tie and murder our senators and vice president, and
Yeah.
because they didn't like the outcome of the election, and they decided, well, we're just gonna make up our own way because we're gonna make a coup.
Yeah. Interestingly, David also mentions that the media has also lost credibility with how they cut and snip clips. It's sensationalist. That's a very interesting point and a very good point. No, you're not ranting. You're good. That's a good point. Because in a way, like I feel like this has happened the past 4 years too. And I think this speaks loudly to how our president especially is very media savvy too, because he's an intelligent person. He knows how to work with media to focus certain conversations. That's another example of rhetorical capability.
He definitely
And
knows how to get the sound bites.
exactly. And the media has kind of taken away with this, like almost like sports coverage in a way. Like this is what's happening now. This group's against this group, that group's against that group.
And it upsets liberals, it like triggers liberals, and it like radicalizes his base.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because every time a liberal or a leftist will be upset, it like fuels and like ignites his base, and like they're like, yeah, another liberal's triggered. Trump is doing the right thing.
Yep. You hit the nail on the head. Yep. And another thing that's interesting is that obviously this is the first time in our history that a president has been impeached twice, and the first time in our history where an impeachment has had this level of bipartisan agreement. I mean, there were still a lot of people who opposed it, but there were a surprising number of people from the conservative side who supported it, because a lot of those people realized that what has happened has been seditious, you know?
And I mentioned this in a video on my page, that Mitch McConnell is basically giving a gift to the Democratic Party by having them wait until after the inauguration to start the Senate hearings, because by having them wait, he's having a Democratic-led Congress start the hearings, so they're much more likely to do something about Donald Trump instead of just voting it down like they did the first time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I thought about that. Yeah, that is a good point.
because the first time, it went to the Senate and it just died because it was Republican led and they were just like, well, we're not going to do anything about it because, Trump's our boy. We're not going to do anything, this is a political matter. And McConnell in the state, he's very angry at Trump, and he has had his wife quit Trump's uh, personal
Oh, the cabinet, yeah.
the
Well,
cabinet.
and I think that that speaks loudly too, because like there is so much polarization right now on both sides, but there are also a lot of people who have the rational capability of looking at what's happened over the past week and being like, this is not
Beyond
democracy.
It's beyond partisanship.
It is. Yeah, it is beyond partisanship at this point. And like, and moving down to like our questions as well, like I've been really just thinking about the question of um how do you think recent events will impact the mental health of our nation? That's a big
Well,
question.
that's a big question. I think that well, first of all, I saw an ABC News poll that said that 48% of the population doesn't believe in impeachment. So half this country doesn't believe that Donald Trump should be impeached.
Hmm.
And that's like that's a huge number.
That is
Like,
an alarming number.
so half of us are like, Donald Trump's an okay guy.
Yep. I think that the mental health of our nation has been affected on multiple fronts. With radicalization, I think there's a lot of anxiety. And I really do think that a lot of people are living in this state of fear of like, what is to become of us, you know? Because like our nation has been lauded as being the oldest democracy in the world and the example of democracy that a lot of other nations look to. What does it suggest if our democracy has been put in jeopardy like this?
Do they think that like it was just like a few like random individuals that like just came out of nowhere, out of the ether, and just committed random acts of sedition? Is that what they think happened?
I I mean, we know that that can't be the case considering how much planning it took, considering the sheer number of people that were there, enough people to overwhelm the security of one of the most secure buildings. Like I
You know, it's,
like
it's really horrible.
mm,
So after the attacks, guess what came up in my YouTube recommends?
what?
A guided tour of the US Capitol.
Oh my gosh.
It was terrible. I was like, no.
Of all the times that would pop up, it's now. Like, for heaven's sakes. You know, it's just
So the lady said, let's go inside.
why I literally can't even.
Uh,
I know we're getting closer to the end here, but a lot of people have been making comments, especially conservative Congress people, about needing to be unified right now. And my big question is, where was that priority a long time ago? You know, I do think that there should be more unity, but like, I mean, it begs the question of what can we do to bring about better unity?
um,
Which is also a big question. That is a big question.
I don't know. I mean, in my family, we're kind of making fun of my aunt right now. We're
So you
kind
guys
of
are experiencing some unity.
we're kind of like united against her ridiculousness, because she's going back for the inauguration to protest, and like how she's calling us. She says that like my mom drinks aborted babies' blood, and that like my cousin like kills babies, and like I mean, like, how can you,
That
like,
is
talk to
su-
s how can you talk to somebody like that?
that is such an extreme thing to say. Like, granted, I shouldn't be surprised. Like, how many extreme things have we heard over the past several years, right? But like, honestly, unity, it's gonna take time to rebuild it. When something gets damaged that's as fragile as democracy, like, it takes vigilance and time to fix it, you know?
You just need to hold faith that maybe they'll come to the light. That's what my mom said, "You just need to hold faith, they'll come to the light, and, like, they'll see the error of their ways, and, like,
Mhm,
that maybe, like that maybe this will just, like that this is just a dark time right now, and that we're just, like, coming to the of end of the tunnel, and that we can put Donald Trump behind us, and that
mhm.
once he's out of office, we can just put him behind us, and we can move forward and turn the page, and that we can just move forward,
Yeah.
and that maybe people won't be so radicalized once he's out of office.
I really think that it's gonna require a multi-pronged approach. That I think patience, like you were just suggesting, is important too. Also think that since people have been conditioned and radicalized, like, I really do believe that it's all about learning experiences, because how do people get to that point without being taught that way by individuals or groups of people? Like, there needs to be this large swath of reteaching, reprioritizing, re well, like, reestablishing the significance of professionalism and why it's important to respect people who have made careers in the sciences and in education and in journalism and in all sorts of other areas people are being where people are putting out reliable researched information, like, that needs to be regained in some fashion.
And maybe just, like, be able to treat people of color well.
Yes. Being able to have, like, because I know, like, having conversations about white supremacy and racism and homophobia and transphobia and all of that stuff, like, it's almost become this thing that large groups of people just scoff at this point. Like, it's a joke to even talk about it. And I really want to believe that we can reverse that in some way, because those things need to be talked about. Because what makes America wonderful, in my opinion, is its diversity.
It's true, yeah.
Like, there's so many diverse groups of people, and we're all in this together, creating this place that is intended to be accepting of everyone, intended to help bolster people's dreams of striving for success and bettering themselves. Like, I don't think that should be lost, and I don't think that should be designated for only certain groups of people, you know.
Mm-hmm.
RP asks, I know this is off topic, but did you make a YouTube video? The last video you posted is private. Yes, I did make it private because there was a big editing error in it and I was annoyed at it, so I just made it private. That happens sometimes. I rewatched it and I was just like, Donny, what were you doing? But like, I know this was a very heavy subject, and I know that a lot of us are feeling the weight of everything, but I still firmly believe that we're going to get through this together, and that regardless what people's stances are on things, I do believe in our capability to come to mutual understandings, you know, and to respect. That's so important too. Well, my dear Ari, do you have any parting words for our friends this evening?
I believe that we can get through this together. We just have to have patience and the ability to believe that we can get through it.
Agreed. 100%. So just a shameless plug before I let you guys go, before we let you guys go. Make sure you subscribe to Ari's channel, Stranger Thing, or Stranger Things. I have Stranger Things on the brain. Strange Nothings. Subscribe to mine if you haven't yet. Click like on our video. Share it around if you feel that anybody may benefit from these conversations. And tune in next Thursday or next Friday. I am so mixed up. Tune in next Friday for our next episode of Restitching this Tapestry. Anyway, we love you all, and you have a good night. Bye.